Good afternoon, mostly, I'm guessing, but good morning and good evening, if it is good morning and good evening, wherever in the world. Special little extra hangout today with David Walters, and David is half the man he used to be. Good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon, Gary. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And you're half the man. I'm going to talk about it first because it's worth talking about first, because you are raising quite a bit of money for charity, and that is what that dummy is about behind you, I believe. Team Easy, tell us first about Team Easy before we talk about CQNet.
Team Easy, a group of friends have come together, and we're looking to raise awareness of PTSD, but also raise as much money and exposure for Help for Heroes and the great work that they do for our guys that are serving and that have served. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
That's all right. It's only a pleasure. And as I say, you're half the man you used to be, and you are putting me to shame. And I am, as you pointed out earlier, where am I? Because if you're unaware, David quite often talks to us in our 2100 GMT every Tuesday hangout, and I'm normally sat in the room. I'm sat in my oldest room, and I've rushed around trying to get technology to work this afternoon. So if this all falls apart, I don't doubt it. Well, I won't be surprised. Anyway, right, enough nonsense from me. CQNet, I'm still not sure why I need it. Why do I need CQNet anyway, and what have you changed?
So we developed CQNet and launched it at the early part of last year at UVSI. And it's a flight management, safety management tool for organisations that allows them to have that complete overview and scope of current operations that are being planned amongst their teams, and it enables them to ensure their teams are following the procedures, the processes, etc. within their organisation. And what we've been doing over the Christmas period is pushing out some big updates that we've been working on the system. Around some of the workflow within the system, and also within the mobile applications as well. We've just launched our Android app, so that's now available in the App Store at the moment. We've made some significant updates to our iOS platform, which we can touch on in a moment, and just some additional features from feedback that we've received from the end users, and also using some of our own experience when we've been out in the field. One that you're going to like in a moment, I know, is having the snapshots of offline airspace data. And again, we can come on and show you that in a moment.
What are we talking about, David? Are we talking about I'm a one-man Part 107 operation, or am I a 100 UAS major surveying company? Who's this for?
So at the moment, we're focused on the larger organisations. It's pushed as an enterprise product. We've got clients that have got 5 pilots that are looking to scale up their operations. So they're looking to bring in a system like CQNet now, so we can grow with them and help them grow. We have a client on board in the US that's got 25 pilots at the moment that are using the system. Again, another large organisation, and as you well know, trying to manage the flight logging, battery management for 25 different team members with 30+ aircraft is a task on its own. We are potentially looking at partnering with some organisations where we can start to bring in some of the smaller operators, the 2 to 3 man teams. We're still working on a strategy with regards to pricing to be able to suit that. But that's something we're hoping to bring out with some of our partners moving forward. It doesn't suit the hobbyist. It isn't designed for the hobbyist end users. In fact, they'd probably look at it and go, for the sake of me wanting to fly my aircraft today, it's overkill, and there are apps out there that support the hobby market. So we're talking really the enterprise market at the moment.
All right. Well, maybe it's just easier if you show me, and then as we move along, you can perhaps point out the new features, but perhaps just walk me by the hand through the system. How could we do this? And we haven't, dear viewer, we haven't beforehand. So whatever I throw at him now, I am going to be throwing at him now. So let's well, all right. There's 2 sides to this, then, isn't there? There's the I own the company, or is the I am the pilot. So let's say I own the company. Do you have the ability to task a pilot?
Yes, so within the CQNet application that we've got that's available on the iOS and Android now, team members are added to missions, and the screen that I'm streaming at the moment is live from my mobile, and I can see all of the missions that have been assigned to me as a team member. And one of the new features that we've recently added to the system is, as teams and as pilots, we can go out and we can carry out surveys and carry out missions at locations and pre-plan them. But as always happens, we get the odd requests for, oh, we have this field down the road, can you go and survey this? And we've done no pre-planning, let's say, for that area to be able to do that.
For a moment.
And
for a moment, did you keep talking?
Yes. Yeah, no,
if I'm not here, you just keep talking.
That's fine. And what we do is generally we would reach for the aviation chart in the back of the van, and then use that to check our airspace. But what we've done with CQNet, and as far as I'm aware, it's the first app on the market that's currently got this feature added, is we now have been working with our data provider to enable this feature. We now have the ability to cache airspace. So at the moment, where you've got a data connection and you're out in the field, as long as you've got a data connection, you can plan your missions, etc., and see the latest airspace data. We also have a feature where you can still work through your checklist, etc., with no data connection. But the problem we were struggling with is, well, that still means the pilot and the team members have got to reach for a map in the back of a van to check the area that they're currently flying in. And in some cases, they might not have the airspace chart to hand to be able to do that. So within CQNet now on the application, at the moment we've got it set to 5 grid references. But essentially, if you know you're going to be flying in a particular area on a particular day, you can cache the airspace for a 48-hour window. Now, typically, we know the air act cycle updates every 30 days. And with CQNet, we've allowed a 48-hour window. One, because typically, at some point within that 48-hour window, you are going to get a data connection, whether you go back to your hotel or back to the office, etc. So we deem a 48-hour window to be sufficient. And then what caching the airspace will allow you to do is, once that's stored to the device, you can then see clearly the area that you've now got coverage for. And as you can see with the 5 squares, it's quite a large, significant area, and a lot of airspace data. That data is then saved to the phone and then synchronized. And I'll just move to something I planned earlier, because we can't obviously stream the phone in airplane mode whilst broadcasting. When you go to plan a mission, you get a notification that you are in offline mode, you've got no data connection, and that the changes will be synchronized once you go online. So then the next thing,
sorry, David, could I slide that 48-hour thing? Because there's some bits here in Africa, for instance, I might be away from airspace for a week, or is that hard line and that's that?
At the moment, it's hard line at 48 hours. We will monitor kind of the usage and the progress and the requests from the end user. And then we will then potentially look to open that up. We have to satisfy that we are providing as up-to-date and as real-time information as possible, but then also, not restricting the operators from being able to carry out their operations, and giving them the flexibility that they need. So the stage 1, we have it fixed at 48 hours. We will monitor the usage, and then I think we'll go from there.
I like that. I like very much that we're flying from Sywell. I know the bar there very well.
I bet you do. That's why I chose it.
Okay.
So you can see now we're still in offline mode, and we need to specify our flight area. So I've selected the flight area on the map, and it's telling me that we're using cached airspace data. We can see when the last snapshot was taken, and as a user, you're required to acknowledge that. And so again, we're putting ownership on the pilot that he's happy for this flight to go ahead based on the airspace snapshot data that he's got. And to be honest, that's going to be more up to date in real time than the aviation chart that he might have had in the back of his van for the last 12 months. So then once the users plan their flight area, they then get all the traffic zones then populated on the app as if you were on online mode. And you can still record your mitigations as is required within our application against those. And then when you do go online, those are then synchronized to the portal. So again, in the office, the organization can then see that the pilot has done everything deemed required to be operating safely. And then just as you can zoom out, you can see the area that I've chosen. You can see the airspace, shapes clearly defined within the area that I've selected. I would like to do some further updates. So again, this is kind of the first launch of this feature, but I'd like to bring up airspace classes and additional NOTAMs, etc. as well. But that's going to be in development and something we're going to work towards.
And just to be clear, this you won't be it won't then be going off and doing flight plans for mapping missions and things like this. We're talking about authorizing the flight. Have I got that right here?
Yes. So the pilot can essentially see in the application that he's been due diligent. He's accessing airspace data that was snapshotted within that 48-hour window. The grid references aren't to be confused with the FAA workflow that's currently going in place with LANC. Although it wouldn't surprise me if the UK did follow suit coming in the next 12 months.
No.
With the changes they've got planned, who knows? But for us, we wanted to implement a feature that, again, just helps with the typical operator's workflow.
I suppose that brings up a good point, though. If you're in America, does this support the LANC system or LANC?
Through the web-based portal, we have already started to bring in through our data service provider the authorization zones that the FAA have released. As we know, LANC is not currently live, and only selected parties are currently beta testing that product. Again, it is not live, but when it does come live, we'll be working towards having that functionality and process within CQNet.
Obviously, there's a fee to use CQNet, but is there anticipated to be a bolt-on fee to use to add the Lance thing in?
Not as far as I'm aware. We certainly don't foresee it. The information that we've had from the FAA, there is no mention of subscription fees or anything like that at the moment. I believe, and my understanding is that just for the FAA efficiencies alone, and the gains that they will make with this process, being an enabler, at Consortiq and with CQNet, we don't foresee that happening. If it does, it will be a surprise, and then we will update the end clients accordingly, but we don't foresee that.
It'll be a surprise for everybody, won't it? I suppose that brings me then to sort of or actually let's continue on looking at the product or any changes, and then I'll come up with some questions afterwards if I remember.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So some of the other features, in fact, I'll just bring this up on the screen now. So some of the other features that we've recently implemented within CQNet allows organizations to create departments within their organization. What this then enables them to do is plan, for example, missions under that department and add users under that department, which will then kind of put a privacy barrier in place, if that makes sense. So if your organization and one of your teams is carrying out missions that you don't necessarily want other departments to see, especially within a police force, if you've got a police force using CQNet and they've got a tactical team that are planning missions that other police forces, they don't want to share that information with them, or maybe you're a broadcasting company and you want to kind of keep private all the latest immediate news flights that are currently occurring from the rest of the team. Again, within CQNet, we can now do that. So under the organization function, you can go in, as you can see, I created a news department here, and then I can then go through and add users to that news team who can then also manage their own assets, etc. But what will happen is, from an organisation top level, you would still be able to see all of the relevant flights as an administrator. So if you are the organisational administrator, you get to see everything in all departments. But if you're a department manager, all you get to see and do is manage your own department. And that's a request that we've had from several organisations so we've implemented that, and hopefully will be of value to some of the end users.
Yeah, that was exactly going to be my question. That seemed very much like a user requested feature.
Yeah, and I think it also enables, if you're an organisation, it enables you to also separate, if you're using it for managing internal teams and contractors as well. It enables you to task it to different teams. And again, it doesn't necessarily need other team members to see the jobs that are being planned, etc., and everything else. So yeah, it's a feature that we were asked for, and that we're now kind of glad to implement and share. Some of the other features that we've added recently, the free fly outer 6 and outer 8 aircraft flight logs now, we are able to bring in to the system and fully pass out and kind of read within CQNet. As you've seen before on previous demos, we can now show the battery levels, the flight path, etc. within CQNet. We have clients that have been waiting for this update for a while, and due to all the other requests that we get for aircraft to be added to CQNet, it does take some time to develop the code, the parser as we call it, to be able to suck that flight log in and display readable, relevant data. We've also done some...
I suppose that then, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in with a little question there. I suppose then that means that manufacturers have got to keep their the way that they write their log files the same, so that app providers like yourselves can keep up with them.
Yeah, it does become a challenge, especially with the DJIs. The DJI flight logs have obviously recently had quite a lot of changes made to them for reasons, and yeah, some of them have been a challenge. And we typically, with a firmware update, we can have a fix in place and the ability to repass the flight logs within about 2 to 4 weeks.
Do they change? Sorry, David. Do they change every firmware update then?
Not every firmware update, but if there is a firmware update, let's say to a payload or to the system itself, the way the data is recorded sometimes in the flight logs can change, as can the encryption. So yeah, it can be a challenge. Thankfully, the free fly systems, they have some really nice detailed flight logs, and they're recorded in a standard CSV format that I think has only changed once since they launched the aircraft. And the detail in that is really, really nice and clear. There's nothing that obviously they want to hide within the flight log data. You can see every single parameter, which makes it even more powerful for the end user.
Yeah, I think this is something we've spoken before actually on the Tuesday Hangouts, isn't it? It would be really nice. They're rushing in to bring in for aircraft. It'd be really nice if there was a logging standard and that was it. This is how we want it seen, and that's it. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we never know, it might be something with the proposed EASA changes that are coming into play. That might end up being stipulated as part of one of the manufacturer requirements, because especially with the law enforcement now doing data forensics, etc., on aircraft when they're being intercepted, especially in the UK now, they seem to be a bit more proactive to working towards that. They're now doing the data forensics, and they need that ability to read that flight log data. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think
well, part of that comment for a while, because we're talking about CQNet, but I'm interested, we must come back to that comment about more intercepts in the UK. In the comments, JMB 575N, there we are, could be a surname, asked cost. We'll jump straight to cost, David.
Oh, you put me on the spot now. I wasn't expected to do any live pricing.
Sorry.
So typically with CQNet, we have some current pricing structures in place at the moment. Typically, it works out about £70 per user per month for an enterprise user. And depending on your organisation size and whether you take training and consultation with us as well, sometimes the price on that can be reduced depending on the package that's being purchased.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. All right, I shall let you continue. What else have you got to show us on this show and tell?
So some of the other features that we've recently added to the system is around the maintenance system. So before, typically, we had fixed 10-hour windows, 20-hour windows. What we've set up, and I'll just bring it on screen in a moment, is on some of the maintenance schedules now, we've literally enabled you to have the ability to record it by every hour. And the reason I wanted to kind of implement this is typically for those now pushing for OSCs that are doing the proper heavy lifts, you know, not flying your Inspires, not flying your Phantoms, the ones that are flying 20 kilo plus aircraft. They're wanting to do kind of data recording to a level of how many hours has this motor done, how many hours has this bearing set done. So we've literally now enabled the ability to record a maintenance schedule for your aircraft and its individual components down to every hour. So typically, let's take an OSC, you're flying a 25 kilo aircraft, and in your OSC for the CAA, let's say, it could say, I will check the bearings every 3 hours, for example, on a motor, which could be after a day's flying. If you're carrying a 25 kilo payload and maybe you're using KDE motors, for example, maybe that's something you've got implemented to ensure and to give satisfaction to the CA that that is going to be one of your safety checks, especially if you're flying in the middle of London. So we want
OSC, sorry, David, we'll just say OSC for those people that don't know. Am I right in saying that's operational safety case?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's correct. So we wanted to be able to give that ability for operators to record in detail as much as possible, because then ultimately we can then start looking at the trend analysis of the components, which again, that data really isn't provided by manufacturers because it can become quite expensive to do non-destructive testing and destructive testing for manufacturers. And there are some variables that they give out, but they don't share all of it. So within CQNet, if you set yourself a maintenance schedule and your products begin or your components begin to fail before that window, you can then record that within the maintenance system, adjust your maintenance schedule accordingly, and then we plan to start providing end users with that trend analysis. We don't have it implemented yet, simply because we don't have enough data to share. But what we would like to do is being able to capture that data and provide it back to the user, so they can see in real time how the components on their aircraft are faring over a period of time.
So I've got to ask the question then: Have you got? You might not be able to share this answer. Have you got a fairly? Is there a most popular airframe within your system, and then from that, are you beginning to gather that sort of data now? Do you have enough of a platform?
No, at the moment we have enough of a user base where I could say the most popular airframe is going to be the DJIs, and that's kind of why we focus on the DJI system, because it's everywhere. Everyone's flying a DJI system. We're not concurrently collecting end user data for that purpose. We do have in the terms and conditions that anonymous statistics will be captured within the system to provide feedback to the end users, and also help us kind of prioritize functions for aircrafts and additions, for example. One of the interesting conversations I had actually with the head of EASA, the name of the channel now slips my mind, when I was over in Canada, in Montreal at the ICAO, I asked them, is there a mechanism where we can feed back information to an organisation such as EASA, where we do start to see faults developing on aircraft? For example, let's say one of the white drones that's very popular on a certain product release develops a fault, and we start to see incidences recording on our system from various different clients. How can we feed that information back as maybe as an information safety notice? You know, please check your airframe for X, Y, and Z, or don't load firmware X, Y, and Z. But there simply isn't a mechanism to do that. So what we would hope to try and do within CQNet is be able to inform other users within our system of that kind of safety awareness. You know, we've got 4 faults recorded this morning with firmware for an Inspire, let's say. We'd advise you not to update just yet until this has been rectified. And to be fair, if you are a professional commercial operator, you don't immediately update to the latest firmware option anyway with any aircraft until you see what the trend happens. But again, with some of these systems, you don't have an option because the system will lock down if you don't update. And I know operators that have updated whilst on a job, live on site, and then flown with the update without doing any test flights, and that to me scares me, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I know. I agree. Oh, feedback.
So that's where we're looking at the moment with CQNet and with the kind of maintenance side of things within the system and how that is handling the aircraft data itself.
Okay, and then what other additions have you got then, or is that the main additions?
So the last one that we've got, and I should have loaded a flight log actually, and I haven't, is more of a compliance thing really. Within CQNet, as you saw on the application, you get a specified flight area. Within CQNet, what you're able to do now post-flight is actually review the flight area that you specified and then see the flight plan that actually took place, or see the flight that actually took place. So again, from a compliance point of view, you can see if your pilots selected a large enough area to gather the risks for that area prior to flight, and then see if the aircraft breached that boundary box. It's more of an education tool and to give organizations kind of that insight to, you know, do pilots need to be more due diligent when they're scoping out risk in the area of the risk for the area that they're flying in. And also it enables us to see, you know, if an aircraft, for whatever reason, has breached that bounding box, and why did it breach that bounding box? Did the area dynamics change for that location? Did it have a potential flyaway and it was recovered?
And do you use what's the data provider that you use underneath all of this for your?
We're still partnered with Altitude Angel for their airspace data. We are currently tied into them, I think, for another 12 months. The service that we get with Altitude Angel has been really positive. And again, with this offline airspace function that we've been working with them on, you know, they've been really kind of coming forward and assisting us with that. And this, before we first discussed it, they're a little bit apprehensive because, again, using their data, which is cached and not providing the live real time as Altitude Angel like to, you know, they like to keep everyone up to date with the latest information possible. But, you know, we explained to them as commercial operators, there are scenarios where you need airspace data to hand, but you're not going to have a data connection, as you quite rightly mentioned, in South Africa. And as pilots, you know, we're either going to have an aviation chart in our hand that was purchased 6 or 12 months ago, or we might not even have that region available for whatever reason. But having it cached in a 48-hour window, you know, seems a sensible option. So that's where we're at the moment. And then hopefully, depending on the feedback we get, we might be able to open up that window to a longer period of time, as you've already mentioned. We'll monitor it and we'll see.
Yeah. So if you don't know Altitude Angel and want to try it, I'm pro them, and I'll put my cards on the table. The reason I'm pro them is because they're very for an open standard for sharing unmanned traffic management data, and they're for an open standard. And Richard Parker has said to us several occasions, if another business if that open standard happens, another business is bigger and better than theirs for whatever reason and takes that business away from him, he's down with that, and that's cool. I'm cool. He probably wouldn't be all that down with that, but at least he's for free and fair. And we've got to be very, very careful in this UTM enabled world that somebody doesn't have a closed system and shuts it all down. Anyway, off my high horse for a second. So if you want to try it, what I meant was, if you want to try it, it's on SGS News. It's drone safety map. Click that, scroll to wherever you are in the world, wait, and you will see the data that you'll see within CQNet. But what you won't be able to do then, of course, is sort of having attached it to a flight that you're doing and all that sort of good stuff. So that's the difference. JMB again is asking, can flight logs be imported as a batch, say a week's worth of flights?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a feature within CQNet where you can literally just bulk upload. As an example, I uploaded 325 free flight outer flight logs ranging from 6 meg up to 30 meg into the system. It read every single one of those. It plotted them all on the map, as you see within CQNet, all the flight pins, so it's historical data. And it did that in about 8-9 minutes on my 60 meg broadband.
Yeah, we'll do for you. It won't do an 8 or 9 minutes for me. But anyway, that's another thing. That's a problem everyone has.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's a function of where you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and just to go back to that, the data, if people aren't aware of it, it's not just airspace, it's things like power lines, roads, railways, schools, stuff that you risk that you have to mitigate against data.
Yeah, that's correct. So we're not just bringing in airspace data within CQNet, we bring in ground hazards as well if they're available for that region. So it shows you infrastructure, it shows you road, rail, power lines, power substations, nuclear facilities, radio masts. Again, a lot of information when you're doing your flight planning. Typically, you can use Google Maps, but that, if you ever looked at Google Maps, the resolution is great, but it's hard to determine unless you can see the shadow on the ground from the sun where the image was taken, whether there's a power line there, whether there's a pole there, a radio mast. So within CQNet, you know, without an altitude angel, we're bringing in ground hazards, we're bringing in airspace classifications, we're bringing in the NOTAMs. So all that relevant, nice, juicy data that you need to produce your risk assessments and meta statements is there to hand in one space. And hopefully next month we'll have another update to you on another project that we're working that help facilitate some more of the pilot workflow. But we'll save that for next month.
Cool. All right. Yes, I look forward to that. So it's about £70 a person within the organisation to run a month. I can schedule flights and then I can see what a pilot's done. I can see, so can I actually see what his flight planned and then what he actually flew?
Yes, yeah, you can. Within CQNet, you have the ability to see what the pilot planned as the mission. You can see the mission area. If I want to just see, actually, if I've got one loaded, I can bring it up on screen because that's probably the best way to show you. Yeah, so within the system, you can define a flight area. You can then see what the actual flight log was and what it captured, and then see whether the flight actually took place in the area that they specified that it was going to happen. We can then see also that they've completed their pre-flight and post-flight checks. And again, it just provides that more enhanced compliance from an organizational point of view, not necessarily from the pilot, because the pilot might be doing everything that he needs to be doing. But if you're a department manager and all of a sudden there's an incident and the CAA say to you, right, show me the last 12 flight logs and pre-flight and post-flight checklists that you've done, and as a department manager, where do you know where to go and look? Do you start pulling out Excel spreadsheets? Are you looking for the paper copies that were brought back to the office? So it's things like that that CQNet.
So does it arrive just as like, so I could go 12 Joe blogs or Gary's last 12 flights and hit return, and will it then send back a report, as it were, ready for Mr. Aviation Authority?
Yeah, so we have a report function within CQNet. In fact, let me just bring this up now. So we have a report function within CQNet where you can report against a specific pilot or multiple pilots. If I pick myself, you can see here that I've done 244 missions. I've recorded 7 incidences, and I can actually look at that in a bit more detail. So here, there's a test flight with a DJI Inspire 1, inspecting a pylon, and electronic unusual behaviour was recorded by the pilot at location, again, helping us build that trend analysis picture. We can see any messages that were recorded within the flight log as well. At the moment, actually, nothing was recorded by the flight log, but the pilot has logged it manually that there was an issue. So again, it helps us to kind of counter verify what the flight log might be recording as well as what the pilot's seeing.
Right.
Anything exciting on these?
Right.
Well, so you can see the historical ones that we've loaded. These are the bulk flight logs. So yeah, so you get that full picture, and you can click on the mission itself, and it will take you directly to that mission. So if this was a mission that had the incident recorded, which it was, we can go look at the flight log, and it provides us all with the flight duration, the max altitude he flew, the max distance from takeoff, the speed, and then any of the messages that would have appeared in the flight log. So that's kind of what the basic flight log data we can capture. On some of the more detailed ones, we can provide a more kind of enhanced overview for that flight log. It's all down to manufacturing.
Again, in the comments are being asked, can flight log, which had batches, is there any integration with drone deploy or Pix4 or Pix4D mapper, I guess? But that is a separate, and my thinking's right, that's a separate thing, isn't it? It's
Here it is, but it's worth mentioning. We are partnering with a couple of external partners now to kind of provide that next step. So you've pre-planned your mission, you've done your mission, you've got all the data you need as an organisation to ensure compliance. And what's the next step? It's processing that data. So we are in talks with Drone Deploy and a few other partners that are on the market that have approached us and said, we really like your product. Now we'd like to partner with you to provide us that complete solution. So it's still early days, and we're still talking to various people, but it's looking positive, really positive.
So that would be end to end then, flight planning, risk assessment, everything, fleet management, all.
Yeah, exactly.
All in one.
And ultimately, we want CQNet to be flexible for the end user. So we won't just be partnering with one third party to provide, let's say, data processing for mapped data. There'll be multiple partners, and you might have an account with one of those selected. You prefer the workflow better to them. So CQNet actually ends up becoming like a platform where you can tailor it to suit your needs. So at the moment, we only have the one airspace provider, but with the data provider post-flight, you would be able to select, i.e. Drone Deploy, Pix4D, Agisoft, or another third-party provider. And again, just to make it flexible for everyone. I don't believe, just picking the one provider is right, because we ended up reducing the market exposure for the end user. And as me and you know, there are products out there that do one thing really, really well, but other things not so great. Some data is processed in a country where we, as a client, we might not be able to select that country to process our data because of data security requirements. So we need it to be as
really. You've opened that up very nicely then. Well, actually, we've also been asked, is there an ability to import a KMZ? I'm not quite sure why, JMB, but is there ability to import a KMZ?
Yeah, so it's a feature we're currently working on and hope to have deployed in the next update. You'll be able to pull in KML files and KMZ files and overlay them as kind of your own map items. So, for example, if you want to do infrastructure inspection on a pipeline, and you said to your team it's up in Scotland, where, so we're looking at adding a feature where you can bring up your own layer within the system, and then it would display the pipeline location and the route. Let's say it was along here, for example, on the map, because then you could then easily task your team along a route. We have a client in the US that's mapping a pipeline. I think it's something like 200 kilometers long, and they're doing it on quite a regular basis. So that feature request actually came from them and makes actual sense. So it's something we're looking to implement soon.
Okay, cool. It's a bit slow on the uptake to understand that requirement, but I understand it now. That's cool. And also, let's kick back to data security. What in what clever way are you going to steal my information, David?
From as in Consortiq and CQNet?
Yeah. Yeah, as Consortiq and CQ. Yes. What pledges do you have against doing such things?
Well, so within the way we kind of configured and set up CQNet from the ground up, I come from an IT background. Our tech ops, head of tech ops, also comes from a data security, cyber security background, and when we built the foundations for CQNet, you know, we went for this single instance approach where you have your own database with your own data in it. It's not shared with other parties. It sits on your own virtual server and is hosted in a secure environment. And that's why our pricing structure is the way it is, because it doesn't suit everybody, but it suits the enterprise client from a data security point of view. The other
so let's just remember I'm quite slow. So all my data is on my own virtual machine, and
yes.
and it can't leak from one to another. It's walled off, a walled garden, if you will.
Exactly. And we state quite clearly in the terms and conditions of the contracts with the end client and the user that we capture, or in fact, actually, we don't capture. It gets sent to us, so it's pushed, not pulled from your system. Any crash reports or any errors that might be logged, they get sent to us for review. So obviously, we can ensure that we're supporting the end client to the best of our ability. We do capture anonymized trend data. So as I mentioned earlier, if people are recording incidences with a particular aircraft, but the data can arrive at us in an anonymized fashion. So we don't know where the actual end client source was. And again, just ensuring we provide that data security to the end user. Because for the likes of the police and military services that are working on sensitive areas, you know, we don't want to be seen accessing that data. And that's something that we are kind of, how can I word it? Quite proud of ourselves. You know, we don't want to be seeing that data. And again, you're talking about the ETM earlier. We are working with Altitude Angel with regards to this flight declaration. And again, it's coming as an EASA requirement. And now the UK CAA have kind of jumped on with hobbyists having to use an app in declaring kind of where it is that you're flying. There are pros and cons to that, I think, for the hobby market, but let's look at the commercial kind of market for the moment. Again, so we're talking about data security. As a commercial organization, there might be a flight that I don't want to declare. So let's say, for example, there's been an airplane crash and the AIIB have to go out and investigate, and they're going to be flying drones over that site. You know, they might not want to declare we're flying drones here, because that instantly is going to raise questions. You know, what are they out there doing? Or maybe the police, you know, are flying a drone and are monitoring someone. They don't want to be declaring a flight. So within CQNet, we're working on a workflow where you have the option to publicly say, yes, I'm flying here, or actually, I'm not going to declare this flight for obvious reasons. So again, ensuring that data security and that data privacy to our end clients.
That's, yeah, it's quite a thing, isn't it? I wouldn't want to be declaring all the flights that we when we came out of that pub or another pub down the road in Wiltshire, and you go and play beer skittles with your flying wings on the hill. I don't think those midnight flights would necessarily be I can instantly see many flights that privateers wouldn't want to declare. No, it's yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know where I sit with the idea of that, especially when that brings in immediately the requirement to have a smartphone, something which many 10-year-olds, I know they all seemingly all do have them, but maybe they don't. And why should some youngster throwing a model aeroplane around in the park be be penalised? And I suppose there's another reason. There's a tracking reason, isn't it? You're then tracking a minor if they're declaring a flight.
And also, if you look at from again the likes of the guys at the LMA, the Large Model Flying Association, in the UK, some of these guys have been flying these model aircraft and scratch building them for the last 70 years, let's say. They're not young guys. There are young guys there, but the old timers, let's be honest, they like working with wood. They've got that engineering mindset, but some of them still haven't got to grips with technology. Are they really going to want to get out a mobile phone and launch that they're going to fly their scale Spitfire, around a circuit, around a model flying field? No.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's going to be
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Also, again in the comments, do CQNet, or I guess Consortiq, operate as a contractor? I see what you're getting there, JMB. You're getting at, are you seeing what everyone else's jobs are coming up if you're a contractor?
Yeah, so at Consortiq, they made a decision quite a while ago, not to compete against our own clients. We provide training and consultation to enable organisations to grow, and go out into the market and win work. And the last thing that we would want to be doing is competing against them. So we made that. We don't provide drones as a service. We do hold a PFCO in the UK that we use for R&D testing, with regards to CQNet and some other bits and pieces that's going on, but we don't actively operate drones as a service.
Okay, that's cool. I think that's a wise time to leave it, because my internet keeps dropping in and out. And I've said that. Have you said everything you need to say, David?
Yeah, no, thank you for your time today. It was good to have a catch up. And if anyone has any questions or anything in regards to CQNet, pop over to the Consortiq website and take a look at some of the latest features that we've got implemented.
Yeah, no, thanks very much indeed. And I look forward to hearing next month then about whatever the pilot-sided updates are. Great to see you. Well done. A lot of work for charity. Well done. Great work you're doing there. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. And dear viewer, don't forget, join us at 2100 GMT every Tuesday for our chat of nonsense with Bruce Simpson, amongst others, generally. All right. Thanks very much. Take care, David. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, dear viewer, as well. Bye-bye.